this is the webinar on enterprise transformation with Agentic AI. We're very excited to be joined by some industry leaders to talk about this topic and to help us learn and understand how Agentic AI is going to optimize organizations' performance, but also how it could impact our enterprises too. I'm Sian Rodway, COO of Manuka, formerly Sinvert, and those of you joining might have been expecting to see some Sinvert branding. We have rebranded recently, really exciting time for us at Manuka. So you'll be hearing much more about our new brand soon. But for now, I want to introduce our panelists. So I'll be handing over the mic to them shortly to say hello and introduce themselves. We've got Gareth Martin, CEO of Manuka, Dale Williamson, EMA CTO at Databricks, Martin Horton-King, former head of data at the Kier Group, and now working in an advisory capacity, helping many organisations with their strategy setting when it comes to AI and data. And James Taylor, product owner at Bibby Financial Services. So just a bit of an overview of how this session is going to work. We'll be putting some questions to each of our panel, really trying to grill them and find out as much as possible. There is also a Q&A available to all of you joining us, so please feel free to drop questions in the chat and we will get to them, as many of them as possible. But with so much to discuss, I'm just going to hand over the mic for those introductions, and starting with you, Gareth. Can you tell us a bit about you and your involvement with AI?
Yeah, sure. Hi. Yeah, nice to meet you all. I'm Gareth. I am the CEO of Manuka. I know you said Sinvert there, but Manuka. So I've been working in the AI space for about 15 years, designing solutions and building teams to deliver solutions across the initially data science space and then evolving into the more Gen AI space over the past few years. And yeah, I think it's a massively exciting time. Finally, AI is cool. Before it was a bit of a side project, but now everyone wants to talk about it. So very happy to be here and talking about, I guess, how industry will change, how all of our roles will change now with the advent of AI and the sort of AI revolution that's coming. Very exciting times. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Gareth. Dale, handing to you next.
Yeah, so Dale Williamson, EMEA CTO. At Databricks, I think those of you who don't know who Databricks is, we're a data and AI sort of company that does software infrastructure for helping companies to get the most out of their data, organize that in a unified format, and actually build AI systems on top. By background, I'm a biochemist, so I used to do a lot of the guys who won the sort of AlphaFold. I used to work on that problem like 25 years ago, but not trying to do folding through first principles, doing it through more homology modeling and, related data, sort of protein data bank work. And back then, any exercise I did was like anywhere from 45 to 185 days. So in my part-time, I became a CTO. So yeah, that's how I ended up here today.
Dale, the Nobel Prize has just been given to proteins being discovered.
Exactly.
With AI, haven't it? Someone beat you to it. You could have been up there with the Nobel.
If I'm honest, like I met them last year, I got like giddy meeting them. It was like meeting your kind of fans. Like sorry, like being a super fan and meeting your like legends. They were just, and people don't even know what all of their names are, but they're just amazing. The stuff they've done is groundbreaking.
They do say don't meet your heroes, but was it one of those occasions, or was it beyond?
They're so smart and also so humble. So yeah, it was good.
Thank you, Dale. James, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes, so I am a product owner for business intelligence at Bibby Financial Services. So I primarily look at automating process and capitalizing on AI to do so. And similar to Dale, I'm biochemistry and genetics background, but I've been heavily interested in AI for years. I remember my first interview out of university was completely hijacked because I saw a book on the CEO's shelf about the singularity point, me and Dale could probably spend the whole hour going back and forth on that one, but
Yeah.
in a nutshell, that is me.
Well,
Thank
we've
you,
already
James.
decided that if I get it wrong, I owe you a beer.
In
Yeah,
15 years' time, Dale may owe
that
me a
very
beer.
expensive beer. Super. Martin, over to you.
You're on mute.
Be very brief if I'm on mute. Yeah, hi everybody. Really glad to be here. Following a great lunch with Gareth a few weeks ago, when I think, Gareth, you'd had the idea for this podcast, so thanks for inviting me along. So yeah, Martin Horton-King. I work with companies to advise them on. It used to be just data, but it's increasingly become digital and of course now AI. But not just on strategy, but execution. How do they actually take this stuff and do valuable things with it? How do they turn it into either reduced operating costs, higher margins, a more happy workforce, whatever the objective might be? We always start that process with what I refer to as a value driver model. So which absolutely grounds you in what is the value you're trying to create. There's lots of experimentation going on with AI at the moment, but a lot of it's not going to result in great outcomes. So we've got to really focus in on what are the outcomes we're looking to achieve. And you might actually be doing something different to what you do today, not necessarily making what you do today faster, but completely reimagining your product set using AI to drive that. So there's some great opportunities there. Most recently, I've been working with Kier to do exactly what I've just described. Prior to that, I was at Jaguar Land Rover as their chief data officer, and I've got a career stretching back across many industries, but ultimately I've got my teeth in energy with Shell and BP.
Brilliant, thank you. Well, we're definitely in safe hands with this topic then. And I want to get us started by talking a little bit around how agentic AI is going to impact businesses over the next 3 to 5 years. I'm going to ask each of the panel to talk about how they think we're going to see enterprises impacted, but I'd also like to bring that to life for our audiences. So if you could talk about an example where you see future business models being disrupted, that would be great too. So Gareth, I'll put you on the spot first. What is going to be the impact of agentic AI over the next 3 to 5 years? Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question. And I think a lot of people are talking about it at the moment. From my perspective, it's complete process transformation, right? So the opportunity to change the way that we, and Martin mentioned this, is like not necessarily just accelerating what we do right now, but really transforming how we do it. So the ability to give all of the manual execution sort of executable tasks within a process to the AIs and have them run it much more optimally, much more efficiently. But then I think the game changer that's coming, and it's just beginning now with the agentic frameworks, is the ability for those LLM agentic kind of components to call much more kind of complex mathematical models that will solve mathematical optimization type problems, the machine learning type models. So having the agents able to determine which model they should execute and execute them. But even further than that is the ability for the AIs to develop those models. So now you have the ability. So now you have this situation where you can use AIs to develop, code and therefore to develop, train, test, deploy machine learning models, which are more have a slightly different focus space. That I think is going to be how we can deploy, we can execute, we can develop more dynamic processes which can re-engineer themselves and engineer themselves to react to a changing environment in which they operate. And when we think about an enterprise that is AI powered, interacting with other enterprises that are AI powered and communicating through the AIs between the enterprises across the processes, it's a different world, right? It's a huge change, and it's even difficult to imagine that. But I think that's what we have to start to imagine in order to realize where this is going to go.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. And Dale, I'll come to you next, and I'm interested in a sector or a process sort of in that you might have been working with that you think will be totally transformed.
Well, one of the things that I've been absolutely fascinated with is like everyone has kind of landed on coding being the kind of first real killer use case. I think the second one is data entry, something we internally call batch inference. So effectively, you're taking large batches of very unstructured data, and in a similar way to how ETL used to work for structured data, you're piping this through and to create real meaning out of it, but like from sort of very raw settings. And I'll give you a tangible example. So we have a lot of salespeople that work at Databricks, loads of salespeople. And it turns out they're not great at data entry. And there's this thing I call trace dilution, which is they'll sit in a meeting and they'll capture about 3 pages of notes. Those 3 pages of notes result in 3 bullets in Salesforce. And effectively, the language they use, the structure they use is very specific to market, specific to team, specific to industry. So you end up with this kind of real big sort of semantic problem of just trying to figure out, is this something we've done before? So just asking yourself the question of like, have we done this before? Because the language that's captured is so bad. So the trace dilution is twofold. One, you go from 3 pages to 3 bullets. So being able to have access to the raw 3 pages will answer a huge amount of questions upstream for management teams. Also then having sort of a lot more synthesized language. And we talked a lot about glossaries, and we talked a lot about dictionaries, and we've talked a lot about taxonomies, and all of these things that are fundamentally a big problem in governance. That ingestion, solving human administration and data entry, unification of language in the business, reducing the amount of poor quality data on entry. Humans are just rubbish at entering data. Like, we get a lot of data from machines. They actually produce much better data than the humans. So for me, that's the most tangible batch inference thing. And it also helps solve like translation things. So for me, from an agentic perspective, it might not be multi-agent, but it's very kind of powerful single agent and incredibly powerful for very, very vast arrays. Now it's just, think product, same thing. Think, content, same thing. So it's kind of that killer use case that spreads across every domain. We just happen to have tested it on sales because, that was one of our biggest pain points, was the quality of data coming out of sales systems was just very difficult to make any actionable decisions on. So to me, and what we did, to make it very discreet, imagine you have 200 fields in Salesforce that you have to populate.
Yeah.
In our project over the last sort of couple of months, we've reduced that down to 10 fields, and we auto-populate the other 190. And that means you're getting high quality data. A lot of people are calling it the shift left.
Mm-hmm.
To me, this is shift left to the point of origin. And that's humongous. And that's where actually AI and data systems can play a material role. The devil, though, is in the detail of how you do that. That's really where we're at now, which is super fascinating.
Yeah, that's a really interesting use case. Thank you, Dale. And Martin, building on that, you've got experience across a lot of industries. Have you got your own sort of killer use case or a perspective on where the impact will be?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a killer use case, because I think there's 2 I want to mention. One is factory processes, so manufacturing processes, and complexity of joining the dots across your supply base, a very complex supply base, perhaps with tens of thousands of particular components. Joining that together through the entire manufacturing and design process to a finished product at the end is a really, really complex thing. And there is, what you said there, Dale, really resonates with me, because the language and the data models and the structure of that data, as it moves through that complex life cycle, it's just too many walls that are up at every single stage of the process. We need to break those down. So if it's going to have an impact, it needs to see right across those processes. So not individual functional processes, but full end-to-end value chains. So that's where I see the impact being. And a more practical one, which is a bit similar to Dale's, is if you're in a business where you're receiving RFPs and RFQs, and you need to have a bid response to a really big complex construction piece of work, you end up having maybe 20 to 30 people working on that response. They've all got their own lexicon. They've all got their own way of thinking. The room for error is massive, and you've got a bank of data about bids you responded to over the past 50 years. Well, there you go. You don't need to have those expensive people, and they are expensive, working on something that is not going to be perfect, whereas AI will sort it out in no time at all. I mean, it's quite bewildering how fast it is to actually produce something that's a higher quality than it took 30 people to do. So I think that's a massive effort. And I think a lot of the processes people are looking to are actually fairly low end. Let's replace the spreadsheets processes. But if you go for the high value stuff, you can make a much bigger impact.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. And we'll come back to talk about what that means for those 30 people shortly. But James, I just want to bring you into the conversation and put the same question to you, really. Where do you see the impact?
So I think artificial intelligence is not just going to transform businesses, it's going to transform lives. It is going to hit every domain of everybody's life, regardless. A personal example, about 4 weeks ago, unfortunately, I didn't have an AI-powered bike, so I fell off my bike. Excruciating pain, had to make the voyage to the hospital, have all the awkward x-rays. Got a photo of my x-ray, and within 5 minutes, using a personally built AI that encompasses my entire genome, all of my health history, everything down to my dental records, it can tell me within a minute, yes, you have a right collarbone clavicle fracture, it is not misaligned. And by the 3 hours that I saw the doctor, I knew the intricacies of my injury, and it had even given me a robust recovery program down to what supplements I should take at what time of the day for it to heal. And I turned up back to the doctor about 3 weeks later, and he was blown away. Like, how have you cured this so quickly? And just think, if that was spread off across healthcare, the hours saved would be colossal. And these hours could be spent, one, on more serious injuries, people that do require urgent attention. It could mean nurses could give the diagnosis over having to wait for a specialist in bone health. And this goes across every single sector. If you think about COVID-19, I know there was quarantines and XYZ, but if AI could pull in the virology of pests, diseases, weather, water conditions, and could actually say there's a high chance of a disease breaking out in this exact area at this time, you could prevent the outbreak before it happens, and you won't lead to quarantines across the world. The economy won't completely halt. So it really is going to transform every part of life. I've given a health example there. I've given one personally about myself. So it's regardless. It's like the invention of the wheel, the invention of the steam engine, the invention of the World Wide Web. And I know people worry it will replace jobs, but when agricultural machinery became prevalent, I think it was 5 out of 6 people worked in the fields. Suddenly there was people that could pursue other avenues, and that sparked the Renaissance. So you had your Galileos, your Da Vinci's, your Michelangelos, free to embark on other ventures. And that is built up steadily from there to this very conversation right now that we are having over the internet, invented by Tim Berners-Lee. So it's exponential, and Moore's law, it's going to become quicker. I won't get Dale started on when quantum computing becomes prevalent alongside this, but it's going to transform everyone's lives for the better.
And I think very pleased to know that you are on the mend, James, and thankful to AI for helping with that.
Well, I'm in a rowing race in a few weeks, so hopefully an even better case study if we win.
Absolutely, we'll have to get you back. I'm interested, now we've talked about the impact of AI, agentic AI. I want to come back to you, Martin, and talk a little bit about, we've got lots of leaders of enterprises thinking about what their strategy should look like, doing their strategic planning. How does the approach to strategic planning need to change or need to consider this impact of AI?
Gareth will probably say these things, but for me, there's the business strategy, right? And the business strategy is really abstracted from technology at the moment. Okay, the business strategy is to do what the business traditionally has done, and so at the moment, what we're doing is we're matching our technology capabilities to an existing business strategy, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely fine. And the way I I've always advocated for doing that is to build a value driver model out of the business strategy. So the business strategy will have a set of outcomes. Those outcomes need to be modelled. Otherwise, you might end up taking the wrong actions, right, or implementing the wrong thing. So start with a value driver model, define what those outcomes are, and then define your technology solutions, including AI, to support what those outcomes need to be, right? That's the first one. The second one's a bit more tricky, and it requires a bit of a cultural shift in the boardroom. And it's how do we leverage these technologies to completely reimagine what our business strategy should be. Now, I've seen that a little bit in automotive. You probably all seen the bit of a furore when Jaguar announced those new cars. That was interesting to watch. But there's been a piece of work going on in there to go, how can we reimagine our product based upon integration of data, technology, digital and AI into our actual products? Now, I can't talk too much about what that means because it's kind of future stuff for the Jaguar brand, but that is coming in cars, right? And that's about how do you think differently about what you can offer your client base. So I think that it's definitely a boardroom conversation. I think it needs to be, what's the right word for it? It needs to be provoked. You need somebody in the boardroom who's digitally minded, who understands these technologies, who could actually provoke the board and then the executive team to start thinking in a different way. So that's a hard thing to do. I suspect it's going to take something like people like us being injected into the boardroom to be that grit in the oyster. And I've seen that happen in a few firms, but I think once you've got somebody in the boardroom who's able to think like that, that's when the catalyst starts. But it's about doing new things, not just automating and digitizing your existing processes.
Yeah, and Gareth, how hard is that? Because you talked about reimagining processes earlier on, and I think that so long we've been almost trained to think about optimization and efficiency and effectiveness by optimizing processes, whereas now we're trying to get leaders to reimagine processes. How difficult do you observe that that's going to be, given your experience in a consulting capacity working with a lot of organizations?
Yeah, like Martin was talking about the value chain mapping, and that's super important. I think the challenge that's going to come is that the speed of change is going to be much greater. So as we start to introduce AI across the business, across the enterprise, across all of our lives, like James was talking about, the speed of change and the speed of, I guess, disruption of every industry is going to accelerate. And so an organizational strategy needs to be designed in such a way, and the organization's kind of mode of operation needs to be designed in such a way that they can react much more quickly to changes in the market, changes in the industry, changes in technology, because the speed of change, with that speed of change increasing, if you don't have a properly agile kind of strategy and set up and processes that sit around that strategy to change with the market, then you will very quickly get left behind. And that's something that we always, when we design a strategy, a business strategy, every sort of board will say that their strategy is agile. It's a living strategy. It's designed to change. It's designed to react to the market, but the market's going to change way faster. So I think the risk there is that if you don't have a truly agile process surrounding that strategy, then you won't be able to react quick enough to the changes in the market that are going to be coming much more rapidly. From my perspective, that's the risk, but also the opportunity. If you want to stay ahead of or at the front foot of your industry, having that set up at the organization level, at the strategy level, but then right the way down into the process and operations is how you retain relevance and mitigate the risk of being disrupted by people who are coming into the market using AI first.
Yeah,
Gareth, do you want to just come on that one, Sean, just very briefly?
Absolutely.
If you're not the disruptor, you won't have a business. You need to move into perpetual disruption, right? So interestingly, Jaguar's strategy was called Reimagine, right? And then they stopped making their cars. They just stopped making all Jaguars, right? And they had to reimagine everything from the supply base to the manufacturing plants to the vehicle itself. So you have to be the disruptor. Yeah.
Well, imagine if you didn't embrace Google and you still went to the library to collect every bit of information you wanted. You'd be left behind. You would be so quicker to obtain that information. Imagine if you didn't embrace text messaging and you relied on pigeons carrying notes. You would be left behind as well. But think of a winter's morning. It's a Monday. You've had a brilliant weekend. You wake up, having your shower, springing the step, and then you go, oh no, I've got a huge spreadsheet I need to look over and compare to another for the entire day. Your day's ruined. But you turn up to work, AI has done this for you. That gives you time to innovate on what you would have spent the day doing. You can actually look at it and go, why are we actually calculating this? We should be calculating this. And if it got to the point where AI recognized, actually, this information is valuable to this other siloed team and informed them, that brings the organization together. It will be a matrix of them working together in harmony, information being spread. No more scrolling through your Outlook trying to find archived spreadsheets. It would make life so much more simple. And as I said, it would free up time for innovation. For the individual.
I find it incredibly entertaining that spreadsheets still persist in this new world. And I do think that that is a very interesting sort of mental model that we sort of have. Spreadsheets are great for some things, but like, you know, we can catch an airplane, sort of an aircraft that's gone into space between two picks, but we can't compare two spreadsheets. Like, we have made running a business harder than rocket science. And just to add to so I want to touch on every point made here, just super quick. So in the boardroom, the thing I observe, and I spend quite a bit of time doing that kind of education in the boardroom piece, there's a very sequential process that takes place. We form a business strategy, ding, 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 and then AI is at the end of the strategy. Like, the funny thing is that AI is normally the first thing in the strategy, yet it's the last thing and the last team consulted in the strategy. So that's one observation that I commonly see, that we have a lot of business leaders that they have a surface level understanding of AI. And actually one that's terribly dangerous. The second thing is nobody is talking about intellectual property. And in this case, your intellectual property is the proprietary data that exists in your organization. Nobody is thinking, how do I protect this? Nobody is thinking, how do I turn this to work? How do I convert this into something that's incredibly powerful to drive my business? The third thing that I always observe is everyone talks about value streams and processes, but actually, if you really go do the Six Sigma style work of digging into the actual process, so
process improvement, by the way,
the level of activities that are done step by step in the process. Firstly, the thing you'll pick up is that there's 17 interpretations of the process. And secondly, you'll find that the number of activities that fit into that process, it couldn't fit into a year, never mind a week. So it has this relative basis of people being incredibly busy because you've got compounded activities that have taken place through multiple iterations of disruption that have happened over the last 20 years. And effectively, we've assembled compound both technical debt, business debt, which is ultimately like quick hacks that we've tried to do in the business. And something I heard yesterday, which I hadn't actually heard before, but it's truly fascinating, is this idea of intellectual debt. And that is, where is the knowledge of how everything works? And it actually lives in the gray matter of most of the most tenured people in the business that aren't in the executive room. So there are these fundamental problems to creating this sort of approach. This is all system thinking. This is all complex systems. And, you know, I'll leave it with the final observation that if you look at the top 100 fastest growing companies in the world, and I actually use Perplexity and then ChatGPT to validate this, majority of them come from an engineering, technical, scientific, or some form of complex domain background. They understand inherent complexity. They're not coming from traditional business executive backgrounds. And this is a really fascinating time to be somebody who came from an industry like biochemistry or genetics, or, you know, an area like cosmology. I met one of the best data leaders I know is an astrophysicist. So there's a fascinating change of world that's about to take place. And there's some fundamentals that boards have to really get into the nitty-gritty details of.
Absolutely.
Dale,
And I'm
we
not going to
need
let
to-
you leave it there, Dale. I want to pick up a bit more on that experience that you've got in the boardroom. And we've heard, and it's really compelling what the threat is, and that things are going to change really fast, and we need to be a disruptor or be disrupted. But in the way that you guys have talked about it, even in the process you talked about there, Dale, you only find out at the end of that process whether or not you have been a disruptor or you've been disrupted. Have you moved fast enough? Have you got the right strategy? So given the speed at which we're seeing change, how do leaders in the boardroom assess whether or not their strategy is good enough, whether their approach to adopting artificial intelligence is good enough, or it's going to leave them high and dry before they get down the line and see the outcomes of their strategy and whether they're realized or not?
I think for me, one of the fundamentals when I walk into a boardroom is like if I ask them for a list of their physical or financial assets, I might get a list. I might. There might actually be something written down which articulates. I mean, if they come from a business like James's, it's more likely they'll have a list. But if you go to a lot of businesses, they actually don't know what all their physical assets are. If you then flip that and ask them for their data assets under management, and when I use the term data, I talk about files, images, videos, voice. I don't just talk about the stuff that's super relevant that sits in, your operational line of business systems like SAP or which are massively valuable, but it's the heterogeneity problem. And I can promise you, finding that list of assets under management, data assets under management, and where they're stored and how they're maintained and what they do is virtually impossible.
Dale, you should go to the next board meeting, but join virtually. And Google have just released an AI version with voice, and you can see if it passes the Turing test with the boardroom as the ultimate case study for them to embrace it. But just drawing back from adoption, humans have gone from writing on cave walls to the Egyptians inventing papyrus paper, to then the burning of the Alexandria Library when they had the cloud. That took humanity back. Then people manually rewriting Bibles, then the printing press. It's evolved these ways of information being stored, and AI is the next steps in regard to that. And that is how humans have created civilizations. It's passing down the knowledge. We are no cleverer than one of the first humans that was in existence way back before the Holocene. But it is just the passing of knowledge that has allowed us to build up this utopia on some days that we are now living in, where we've got the longest life expectancy. And AI is going to take us to the next step. Maybe me and you, Dale, will still be arguing in a pub age 200 because of AI. And I just picked up, you mentioned astrology, so another pub chat we need to have is the Drake equation. Will AI be able to solve the Drake equation? Why have we not been visited by AI autonomous space machines yet? But
there are so many rabbit holes to go down on this topic. I think, Martin, if we think about some of the things that have stayed consistent through human evolution, and we touched briefly in a previous conversation around distrust and the sort of concerns that people feel towards artificial intelligence, but we could look into the past and see that towards other technology changes too. Could you tell us a bit about how we might start to create trust, or if we have to work in an environment of distrust, how we make that a success?
Yeah, sure. I think there's two main pieces to the trust piece. One is, and I mentioned earlier about my first boss at Shell, his two bits of advice for me. His first one was make yourself redundant. That's a good bit of advice for somebody starting out in their career. I don't think many people get that advice though, and so there's a fear of new technology just taking your job away, right? So that's a real basic fundamental. I don't want to innovate. I don't even want to innovate getting off this spreadsheet, because doing that spreadsheet is my job, and I quite like my job. So even though I might hate the fact I've got to do this thing every day, it's paying my bills, right? So there's that fear factor. That's the most basic one. But then there's the other fear factor, which I think is probably more of an executive level or managerial level fear factor, which is, how do I know that what the machine is telling me is the right answer? How do I validate that? Where's the validation point? How can I test it? So that's the first one. When we start talking about AI that can act on its own, that just raises the bar, doesn't it? It's like, I don't trust it to just give me an answer and then me evaluate it. I'm going to let it come up with an answer and then take an action without my intervention, perhaps. That's even more scary. So what you need to do is you need to run these things in parallel and A/B test them, really. It's as simple as that. Test them till you become comfortable you've got the right answer. I think probably one of the leading industries in that has been automated trading floors, automated trade floors, where people are willing to put their money at risk based on algorithmic trading. So that's probably one of the first industries that I'm aware of that's really been that level of trusting in terms of machines giving answers. So I think for me, it's all about testing and demonstrating and building trust.
Yeah.
Well, just drawing into that, Martin, the data entry employees could turn into the data validation. They could check the AI has
100%.
done that correctly. And
Absolutely.
then coming back to evolutionary, humans are adaptable. They will evolve into other positions. They'll become the AI gatekeepers. They'll be the Gandalfs. You shall not pass. You have not done this correctly. Humans are adaptable by nature. It won't replace jobs. It will empower people to move into other positions and leave behind the mundane tasks that they want to abandon and not be working for the sake of bills and electricity. They'll be working in means to innovate and truly use the creativity of the human mind that, say, machinery, artificial intelligence doesn't have. Singularity point, Dale. But it's a freedom. It empowers people. It's not there to replace jobs. You could say the same about every piece of technology. These poor horses, the car is going to make them redundant. There's still horse races. People still have pets.
Yeah.
Any piece of technology, the internet is going to replace all of the librarians. There's still
James,
librarians.
on that one, I think some industries, it'd be great if everybody had an awakening and realised that, yes, we can do all this stuff. But I think for some industries, it's going to have to be a necessity is the mother of all invention point in time, where
Easter Bezerra, yes.
Yeah, well, the person who owns the farm says, well, I'm sorry, guys, the machine's coming on Wednesday, go and find something else to do. So I do think some industries are actually reaching a cusp point where the boardroom are being pressured to say, you have to do some of this stuff now, and then figure out the consequences afterwards. You know,
I suppose the boardroom is Malthusian, whereas you need to have the Esther Bezerra approach of, need is the, catalyst to invention. So that's the mindset
where
change.
Do you sit on that spectrum, Gareth, between jobs won't be replaced to we're gonna see jobs lost?
I mean, I'm completely with James on this. I think Martin and James are both saying similar things. I think that, yes, jobs will change. Absolutely, 100%. Everyone's going to have the ability to give a lot of their tasks, activities to the AIs to execute. It gives people the space to be more creative, to take more agency, to redesign, to think outside the box, to use their human superpowers, whatever they be, in a much more productive way. So I think that I don't think that we're going to see a massive unemployment. I think we will see a significant shift in what people do. Some roles will be much more heavily disrupted than others. It'll come in waves, but I think that there is definitely a revolution, the style of the agricultural, the industrial, revolutions, the advent of the internet, like James was saying. It is that level of change. But we always found a way to keep ourselves productive and deliver additional value. We just have far more tools available to us. So I see it that way. On the security thing, it's interesting because I think there is that the guys were talking about. We will have to manage the AIs. And on the walk in this morning, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about if we have AIs executing a process and other AIs governing that process, then there's potential risk in that space where AI Group 1 infiltrates AI Group 2 and shifts the governance kind of protocols in Group 1's favor. So I think there is something we need to think about in that space. There'll be significant designs.
I want to build on this because it's a really good point. I mentioned trace earlier, trace dilution, and I used it very specifically around notes versus the actual inputs into the system. But one of the things we're sort of seeing massively is we know that models produce trace. We know any, systems produce trace. Stack traces are like something that you get to know when you're a software engineer. And increasingly, the more we capture the model trace, the exhaust fumes that they give off, it becomes incredibly valuable data, not just for analyzing and monitoring, but it also becomes awesome for like retraining. So one of the things about, machine learning and more stochastic models is that they need to be retrained. There's an element of drift. It's about a half-life of about half-life for your average fine-tuned model where it has to be kind of retrained. So that trace is hugely important. That trace is hugely important for managing behavior of models. How do I know that the model is behaving in accordance with its guidelines? You also then have these kind of models that are governing over the models. So you have the kind of action models and risk models, right? And there's this kind of interplay between these two things. What's interesting about this is when we did this with von Neumann systems in the microservice movement, it was very much about distributed tracing. Now, the problem we have today is we think this is solved. We now have probabilistic distributed tracing that needs to be invented in order to really truly understand what these systems are doing as they work. And then we have to invent an entire management guideline for how individuals now have to manage teams of agents. And Procter & Gamble did this really interesting work around this. But the funniest thing is we sort of conflate how advanced it is. Carnegie just did this analysis of a fake company with a whole bunch of agents. And I think all the models were doing work. And I think the best model was Claude that somehow managed to do 24% of the tasks. And it turned into total anarchy. So like multi-agent systems need a lot of scaffolding, need a lot of tracing, need a lot of management principles. There needs to be a whole lot of guardrails. There needs to be a whole lot of evaluation frameworks that are developed. So if you think about a very practical example, which is the software engineer used to be the kind of rock star in the value chain of software development lifecycle, and the QA was always this person at the end that like everyone just hated. Well, guess what? There's a shift in that dynamic where the QA is actually now the rock star. They're probably going to rebrand it. I heard somebody call it the impact engineer or some other variant of the name because we love to rebrand things. But effectively, if you just think full stack engineer, QA, things we grew up with, that QA role is becoming incredibly important. And James actually touched on this for, the people entering the data versus the people curating become the people curating the data. All of these things have to go through their natural cycle. And anyone who thinks that's going to happen in less than 5 years, they haven't lived in the world we live in today. We're still dealing with a whole lot of artifacts that are like multiple years old. So, but there are some fascinating new jobs that'll emerge and new sort of fundamentals. But we have to make sure that autonomous agents that are probabilistic in nature and single purpose, we need to even figure out how do we configure them to sort of operate in a really powerful system. And that requires a lot of deep thinking around the intellect of like how you run an organization, the operating system of management principles. There's a whole group of like old management principles that's making a comeback, something called management cybernetics, that's suddenly become very kind of popular again. and it's to address these sort of problems that emerge in the enterprises. So I think we're going to be a very busy bunch for a very long time.
I
Lots of work to do.
About
and the work's going to be
impacts.
interesting, and we won't be doing, I mean, replacing meetings, that'd be amazing, like with something a little bit more outcome focused, doing things that like are a lot more, creative based and strategy based.
Yeah.
I think
not replacing webinars though, Dale.
Well, I don't know. Like we'll just enhance how they like, and there'll be an avatar of me that's doing this while I'm.
That needs to be banned. This has been fun, but just drawing back to the security, data is out there. My phone right now knows where I am. My watch knows where I am. They've got facial recognition technology out on the streets now. People see data entry into AI as problematic. But AI could be the ultimate shield against hackers. Think of the amount of famous companies who are actually renowned for their security that have been hacked and data has been held for ransom. AI would have the capability of not one, preventing that, but two, preemptively knowing who is planning to hack certain systems. And I've seen examples of people's personal health data being hacked into. It doesn't get much more serious than that. If you had AI detection as a shield to prevent that, I think people would be a lot more receptive to the idea of AI having information as opposed to the fear of it's having the information.
James, are you using, because we're seeing this a lot, like people using their data platforms and their AI sort of tooling to focus on the cybersecurity problem. Are you doing that at your company?
Yeah, we are paramount in data security. So yeah, very stringent processes in that. I've worked in government before where we were exploring AI opportunities, but obviously compliance is always number one. But as we've said, it will get to the point where people will push the boundary, people will go in and they'll capitalize on it. And they'll be the early adopters. People don't want to become the MySpace to the Facebook. So it's not if, it's when.
In the last 10 minutes, though, I just want to remind those that have joined us that you can post a question in the Q&A. So if there's anything that you want to put to our panelists, we've got a few minutes left to do that. Whilst you're thinking about those, I guess discussions about scaffolding or governance lead us quite nicely onto a conversation around risk and risk management. And I am interested to get your view on what new risks organizations who embrace AI need to be mitigating, but also where AI can help reduce enterprise risk as well on a positive side. So where will they see less risk because they are using AI? And perhaps Martin, I can come to you on that first, and then interested in your view too, Gareth.
Yeah, sure. Without naming names, but this is a big risk that the executive team recognise in most companies, and it's really simply the risk of having your employees put things out there about your business that you don't want putting out there. Right? I mean, it really is that simple. We know lots of people across lots of industries are actually just using ChatGPT mainly and other AIs to actually get answers or produce reports or even create data models and that kind of thing. It'd be very easy for you to put things out onto the internet that your company really don't want out there. So I'm sure it's happening. It's absolutely happening. I'm not aware of any specific negative outcomes from that being done right now, but time will tell whether that's true or not.
Training is required because I routinely use, even if you're just using ChatGPT, why won't my DAX code work? It doesn't have any company information within it. That should be embraced, but obviously colleagues need to be trained. Say, don't put in the client's information, don't put in, people's postcodes. So it's a learning adoption, and there's phases of learning, isn't there? There's denial.
Isn't DAX is your semantic model? That's like some of the most valuable data you have in your business.
And it's nothing, if there's nothing personal within it and you want to quickly fix something.
That's personal. But what about IP? This is the point I was trying to make. Like DAX is actually a huge IP piece for any business. It's built over time. It's fundamentally
Say if it's
semantic.
just a simple DAX code within a Power BI.
But you open Pandora's box there, because you'll put in a simple DAX code, and then you'll put in a sort of bigger stretch of DAX code, and then you'll actually throw in a whole DAX model, and before you know it,
you can not actually use the net measure name per se. You could just put example, take that DAX code, then put in your measures, and that will save you a lot of time.
I don't know if you remember this one. You're a smart guy who knows AI. Does everybody know this?
They will do, because it's not if, it's when.
Gareth, you may remember this. You may remember this when we were at Hewlett-Packard together. We did a piece of work, and I'm not going to name the company, but basically we wanted to work out which executives from which competitor companies were flying into a particular geography on a regular basis. There was a huge block of oil wells that were about to be sold in South America, and we worked out that people had been putting data into the internet about where they were going, what they were doing. It was all over there. All we needed to do was join the dots, right? So, if in security services, you do everything to separate your data, not bring it together. Whereas in the commercial world, there's a great desire to bring it together, right? Which does the complete opposite. It makes it very easy for you to triangulate certain outcomes where people didn't think you'd be able to know something. So that fear about using AI comes from those kind of experiences.
Yeah, I think that, Dale harks on about it, and I love it because it's so true, is that the biggest risk, I think, the two biggest risks, I think, in this space, new risks potentially, but they're not really new. The one is, your value is your data is your gold, right? That's what makes you, as Dale mentioned, differentiated. That's how you can beat the market by holding on to all of your true IP and all your data, and also mine external information sets that could assist you. If you expose that, or if you introduce a component that risks the exposure of that, then that's a big problem, right? So I think the first big risk is the one that Dale talks about a lot, which is the risk of losing your unique knowledge that you have built up over many years inside the organization. The other big risk, I think, is that the AI can make bad decisions. And we have to remember that AIs will sometimes make bad decisions. And there's loads of examples of this posted over the internet, like that one where in Canada, I think it was, where the airline, the AI started offering new promotions to people who were interacting with the chatbot. And the promotions didn't exist, but they were offered to customers, and the airline had to honor them. And so there's financial risk and lots of, I guess, compliance risks and whatever else associated with AIs making bad decisions. So we have to be able to prepare ourselves. We have to build a scaffold, as Dale said, to prevent ourselves from designing solutions which can make decisions and can take actions which could be damaging financially or otherwise. I think those are the two big things: the risk of data and the risk of an AI making
AI does make terrible
mistake.
decisions. I've just finished a novel about my grandfather's life. He fought in World War II. And I finished it, and I was like, I wonder if AI could have actually wrote this story. So I gave it the basic outline, and the amount of repetition and the amount of characters it would replace with other characters as it progressed. I was like, well, the human brain is actually still a huge asset, because this is an awful story. My Shakespearean piece is nothing compared to this garbage. So you're very right about the mistakes.
But we can design the scaffold, and we can design the security principles, and it's just a matter of making sure that we do that as we build, and make sure that we're conscious of them as we build the AI solutions, because there is, as we've all been talking about, a massive value opportunity for us, but we just have to take it, consider these potential risks while we're doing it.
Just the Uno flip myself when it came to actually reviewing a chapter. Is this historically accurate? It was gold. It was like, no, that actually wasn't invented at the time. No, they would have had this type of military hat on. So yes, it's good for reviewing, but then the human brain is still precious. The most complex, as far as we know, property in the universe is our brain. Never
Absolutely.
forget.
And what a note to start to wrap up on. It's been great to have you all on the webinar this afternoon. I want you to each leave us now with your sort of final thoughts. We've had a wide-ranging conversation around what AI is going to mean for enterprises. Just a few seconds from each of you on what you would take away from today's conversation or what you want to leave with our audience. Dale, I'll start with you.
Cool. So as Gareth so aptly put it, I harp on about IP, data as IP. This idea of having a proper assets under management, sort of like, where is all my data? What is it? What does it do? How important is it to my business in terms of differentiation? That is a huge thing I want to leave people with, because I think that particular element is going to be fundamental to their differentiation and ultimate survival, however fast they adopt all of these things. Knowing when to build and buy in the AI space is the second thing. We've always talked about build and buy, and build and buy plays its way in here just as massively. There's a reason why there's a big emphasis in, AI being national critical infrastructure. Companies need to think about this being a sort of corporate critical infrastructure, and effectively it's doing a job, and they need to figure out how that plays into the boardroom and decisions that they make. And the last point I'll leave is the systems that, we talk about AI making bad decisions. Humans make pretty bad decisions too that are unaccountable for based on policies that have been written. There has to be a re-examination of how we're running these two systems alongside each other, because otherwise it's going to be absolute chaos.
Yeah, thank you, Dale. Martin, just in a few seconds, please.
Yeah, align yourselves with the value driver model before you do anything. Because if you haven't done that, even if you've catalogued all your data, structured and unstructured, how do you know which bits of it are important and which bits aren't? You have to start there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Martin. James?
Yes, AI is coming. It is not going to stop. Harness it and let your organization mature like a nice Shiraz, and don't let it mature like milk. You cannot stop it coming. And wouldn't we all like to go home tonight with a nice tidy house where an autonomous AI-driven robot has done the washing, cooked your dinner, and you can sit and relax in this beautiful sunshine?
That sounds fantastic. Be more Shiraz and be less milk. Gareth, try and beat that.
I can't beat that. You can't compete with James's analogies. They're too good. So I'm just going to say, look, the thing I enjoyed most about today was when Dale and James and Martin started talking about the application, the potential applications, the amount of value that AI can add to an individual, to a society, to a business, through the application, the intelligent application of it to solve complex problems. That's the most exciting thing. I can't wait to not have to reconcile spreadsheets. So, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Dale, Gareth, James, Martin, you've been fantastic guests. We're very grateful for your time and look forward to talking to you all again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
It's been great.